Who is Gina? Why is Gina? Where is Gina now? I have the passion to empower youth affected as a child. Mama loved the drugs and daddy loved the bottle. The streets embraced me, that was my only role model. From foster homes to juveniles to jailed in the prison, when I cried out for help, no one would ever listen. Labeled as a bad kid, anger and resentment. My whole life work is a direct connection to another child lost or a parent that is stressing. So everything I do is for the pain that exists in the soul of a child that's trying to make sense out of poverty, pressure, drugs, guns, and wildlife of crime ain't going to solve nothing. A true child advocate remembers how it felt to be thrown to the wolves and play the hand that I was dealt. The unique thing about my life is that it can be used in a TED Talk or in a rhyme. My experience in the juvenile justice system has been a catalyst for change for juvenile justice reform in Virginia. Trey has the passion for getting the policies changed surrounding our youth, and I have a colorful story like a modern-day phoenix to reinforce the facts.
So, you know what they say, the bad apple spoils the bunch, right? We take these aphorisms, these universal truths, with a little understanding of how they become true or why they become true. So does a bad apple really spoil the bunch? Why does that have to be bad at all anyways? There's so much I can do with a bad apple. I can make it into applesauce, I can bake a pie, I can put it into soup. Have you ever tried that? It's actually pretty tasty. Yes, Mike, I can put it into soup. So I did an internet research on this topic, and it said, I came up with an article that said, 8 smart uses for not-so-great apples. Thank you, I like that too. It's very optimistic. They're not bad apples, they're not-so-great apples. And you're really smart for using them, right? And you thought you were here to hear a talk on the juvenile justice system. I will get to my point, Gina, you know me, I go off the rails, you have to keep me in line. The point I'm trying to make here is, when will we stop accepting the universal truth and start forming our understanding based in reality?
All right, folks. I want you to bear with me and be mindful of this. This story is a very personal one for me. All right, so imagine a 5-year-old you, 5 years old now, trying to decide what you and your sister are going to eat for dinner. A, do you ask a neighbor? B, do you ask a stranger? C, do you steal it? Or D, do you go hungry? There are many different layers to my story, but my initial trauma lied in the fact that I had to be responsible for a younger sibling. During my mother's addiction, I just wanted my family back together, and I wanted her off of drugs. The tragedy lies in the fact that I was not able to develop as a child normally would, which wasn't fair to me, of course. Trey?
Yeah. So, you know how they took you and your sister and they tried to take care of you, right?
See, Trey has to keep me on point because, like I said, it's so traumatic that even just memorizing or trying to relive those situations, I actually use my train of thought because I want to forget about it, but it's part of me. So at a certain point, they took me and my sister and they put us in a foster home with about 5 other girls. It was kind of like an orphanage. Our foster mother was verbally, emotionally, and physically abusive. And at the end of the day, my therapist named it chronic trauma, you know?
Yeah. So here's a universal truth that I heard once. Some kids just don't deserve to be educated. Seriously, that was said by a lawyer who represents a Virginia school board. Here's another universal truth I heard once. If a kid commits a crime, they must be a criminal. That one's believed by someone who creates the laws and policies concerning the criminalization of our youth. And here's a third one. The justice system was set up to deliver justice and keep our communities safe. Let me address that last point, specifically about the juvenile justice system. So in 2015, which I know feels like a decade ago, but really, literally, that was just less than 6 months ago, almost 10,000 young people were locked up in a state youth prison or local youth jail. 40% of those kids were between the ages of 8 and 14 years old. 64% of those youth had a significant mental disorder. And after 3 years, 78.3% of committed youth were rearrested. 78.3% were rearrested. What does that say about a society that thinks that locking up a kid as young as 8 years old is an acceptable form of administering justice and keeping our communities safe? And we spend $140,000 a year to lock up one kid for 1 year, while only spending $12,000 to educate them. Who's right? I work at a nonprofit organization, and if we reported on those outcomes, we wouldn't be in business much longer. The system, it's gotten out of control.
All right, so again, you folks have to bear with me. Whenever someone shares something that's so personal as their life story, to make people aware of really what's going on and their take on it from the inside, it can be another situation like emotional trauma that a person is experiencing. But it's important to me to get these things off so you folks really know how detrimental it is for us to support our youth. So at 9 years old, my mother moved me and my sister into a battered women's shelter to escape a psychopath. Now, I was just happy that we were all together again, just never mind the fact that we were homeless and starting fresh, right? This is something that I was used to going through with her. She'd relapse, then get clean, relapse, and then get clean. So one day she had a job interview, and as the day turned into night, I realized that she had relapsed and was not going to return. So she basically abandoned us in the shelter. So what I did was the next day I got me and my sister dressed. We went down to breakfast that the shelter offered us, and I just wanted to eavesdrop on a conversation on what their plans were to do with me and my sister. I was only 9, so I didn't have a plan, but I knew I was not going to make it easy for them. That was just me. I was a sassy little thing. Y'all can see by the pictures, right? I was something else. So anyway, by the time CPS arrived, I had barricaded me and my sister in the bathroom and locked us in the bathroom of the shelter. When the CPS worker got there, she tried to coax us out of the bathroom. Come on out, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get your mom the help that she needs, And for me, it was kind of like, only thing I cared about was me and my sister staying together. So I just basically, with tears in my eyes, I begged her, I said, whatever you do, whatever happens, please don't separate me from my sister. So you remember throughout the whole story, the main thing was that I just wanted to keep my family together. That was the most important thing to me. So my mom was gone, and all I had was my sister. So anyway, make a long story short, she promised that she would not separate us. And with all that going on, the police were still trying to get the door off the hinges. They finally got us out. I was not going to make it easy for them. So shortly after, and I kind of went back a little bit. They put us in the foster home together, and shortly after that, I became a runaway because I felt like that the foster care system would be worse than being homeless on the streets of Richmond. How ironic, right? Foster care system. Not saying all foster parents are not good people, but at the end of the day, what I experienced, it was a very traumatic experience for me.
Ginas story, your story, Gina, is an all too common illustration of how a young person's circumstances out of their control push them out of school, and with little lack of care, attention, and resources into the juvenile justice system. Gina survived. Not everyone does. But we've been fortunate enough to work on a project called Performing Statistics, which, with Mark Strandquist, Jaree Thomas, and a whole bunch of other folks, which uses the arts to ensure that incarcerated youth are connected to the juvenile justice reform efforts in Virginia. We've taken their creative voices to galleries and to classrooms, to conferences and universities, to the General Assembly and to the streets. We've even used the work to train all of Richmond City Police Department's new recruits. And it's been a powerful, powerful project. And we're committed to ensuring that incarcerated youth, those that are most impacted by the system, are at the forefront of visioning a new system, new ways of working, new opportunities for communication, new opportunities for investing in a caring community that's committed to the well-being of all of our children.
Yeah.
So here's a quote that I like. It's very big up there. You could probably read it, but I like to say it out loud. At the point of encounter, when engaging in dialogue, there are neither utter ignoramuses nor perfect sages. There are only people who are attempting together to to learn more than they now know. These words are by Paulo Freire, and after reviewing some other TEDxRVA videos, I see that he's a popular guy on the stage, and for good reason. His words are timeless. And he's at the foundation of my work as an arts activist and as a citizen. You know, the answers are out there, people. You just have to be open to them. And I'm not trying to go all X-Files on you. I really do think it's simple like that. You know, oftentimes we ask, or I ask, what's the solution? What's the answer? And 9 times out of 10, you know, that's another one of those phrases that we use all the time. Everything's 9 times out of 10, right? But really, 9 times out of 10, someone has already solved the problem, and it's usually the person that's closest to the issue. You know, there's no secret that our juvenile justice system is broken. If you're a data nerd, you can see it in the numbers. If you're an emo kid, you can hear it in the stories. And if you're just someone who deeply cares about the city of Richmond, you can see it in our fractured neighborhoods that have been ripped apart time and time again by systemic oppression, racist policies, and calculated disinvestment. And I can go on a litany of solutions about the juvenile justice system that talk about a continuum of community-based support, multi-systemic and family functional therapy, restorative justice practices, poverty reduction, school reforms, access to healthy resources, and on, but they only gave Gina and I 15 minutes.
That's it.
So the point today is much simpler. Time and time again, the very people missing from the decision-making table are those that are most impacted by those decisions. We as adults who have degrees, who have studied, who have power and influence, we think we know the answers. Well, how about asking someone that's most impacted by the systems for the answers? Thinking about our juvenile justice system, it's time we stop seeing kids as the crimes they commit, but as kids. Stop seeing them as the problem, but part of the solution.
You know, and this is the main reason, Trey, why I believe that the school-to-prison pipeline epidemic needs to be looked at as a community crisis. We need to reframe and change, you know, our way of thinking. You know, just think about how many youth are being locked up for situations that were out of their control, similar to mine, you know?
Gina, before you get too far ahead,
Yes.
will you go back and finish the story?
Sure. I get excited. This is our thing, by the way. All right, so the second part of the story is that my mother wasn't getting herself together fast enough. So I ran away in search of her. And in my mind, I felt that if I found her, that I can get her off of drugs and we can be a family again. If you know any addicts, you know that it's not as easy as that, right? So what happened was, shortly after that happened, they came and they took me to a foster home in Verona County, thus separating me from my sister and also blossoming my distrust for authority figures, the police, and other adults. Now, my sister is still hurt to this day that I left her in the foster home, and she is now 36. That's how deep the trauma can be, you know, embedded, you know? But
what were you feeling?
Well, I actually, it was a lot of feelings. I felt hurt. I felt alone. I felt abandoned. I had a lot of resentment towards my mother because she chose drugs over us and our family, you know? Another classic, chronic trauma?
Chronic trauma,
yeah,
you're right.
Yeah.
And Professor Angela Davis sums it up well when she says that prisons, they function ideologically as an abstract site into which undesirables are deposited, relieving us of the responsibility of considering the issues afflicting those communities from which prisoners are drawn in such disproportionate numbers. It relieves us. It relieves us of the responsibility of seriously engaging the problems of our society. Now, see, I lost my train of thought because I love that quote so much.
We're the boys.
Oh, yeah. So what are we avoiding? That's right, thanks. What are we avoiding? These young people, they're born to be great. Just hear what some of the young men from Richmond's Juvenile Detention Center had to say last year when responding to the prompt. If you knew me, you would know that.
I love my family. That I'm a respectable person. That I need support to be who I want to be. That I have all the tools I need, but I need people to believe in me and my talents. That I'm not a thug just because I'm black.
Fund programs,
not prisons.
Kids need after-school programs to help with homework and to let them know that someone else cares. They need jobs. They need a rec center, because kids love to play. I know. They need programs to fill their free time. They need big brothers. They need a mentor and a counselor. They need somewhere to go out of the cold. Are these the words of a criminal, or that of someone who is trying to figure themselves out and their world? And I get it. The world is much more complex and complicated than these two poems attest to. But solving our problems through incarceration, through a punitive system, through the continual denial that we may be the very thing standing in our community's way, is not the answer.
Well, we're going to wrap this up, but I want to end my story off saying this, that one morning in the early hours, I stood on a corner with a gun in my waist and drugs to sell in my pocket. I said my first prayer in years. I asked God to save me from myself. A month and a half later, I was sentenced to 8.5 years in a state correctional facility for a felony that I had committed earlier. I was angry and I was upset with my mom, myself, and God. But today, I'm a juvenile justice advocate. I'm a mentor for incarcerated youth. And just like the phoenix, with each death, finish with me, Trey.
Yeah. Because everything I do
is for the pain that exists in the soul of a child that's trying to make sense. Thank y'all for your time.
That's up.